Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for new stories. The Clearith, a stunningly beautiful and graceful alien species, have lived for generations without males. Over time, their society has evolved in a unique way, one where reproduction is maintained through artificial means, but a deep void has remained. The Clearith women are known for their unmatched beauty, intellect, and strength, but the lack of natural reproduction has begun to erode their civilization. Desperation sets in, and the leaders of the Clearith realize that they must find a solution. Otherwise, they face extinction. The story follows one such leader, Lady Zarek, who secretly calls for help from the stars, sending a distress signal that echoes across the universe. Their desperation catches the attention of the Earth. Humans have long been aware of the Clearith, but this newfound need changes the game. Lady Zarek and her advisors prepare for the arrival of the emissary from Earth, hoping that humanity can offer a solution to their crisis. A team of Earth's finest, led by Captain Jax Wilder, a no-nonsense military officer with a reputation for breaking boundaries, arrives on Clearith. They are greeted with awe by the Clearith, who have long heard of humanity but never expected to meet them in person. Captain Wilder, along with his team of soldiers, engineers, and scientists, begins to assess the situation. The Clearith leaders explain their problem and reveal the chilling reality. They cannot survive without male DNA, yet their technology can only replicate certain parts of the species. The Clearith are willing to sacrifice anything to ensure their survival, but the arrival of humans becomes a game changer. What they fail to realize is that humans have a unique resilience, and while they are impressed with the Clearith's beauty and grace, they do not plan to simply hand over what the Clearith seek without taking something in return. Human pride, strength, and survival instincts make them hesitant to bow to the Clearith's demands. As tensions build between the Clearith and humans, it becomes clear that both species have underestimated one another. The Clearith, with their long-standing beauty and advanced technology, initially believe they are in control. However, human resourcefulness and boldness come to the forefront. Captain Wilder asserts that the terms of their cooperation will not be dictated solely by the Clearith. The humans begin testing their technology and their own genetics to understand how they can help the Clearith without jeopardizing their own kind. Meanwhile, Lady Zarek, the Clearith leader, realizes that the humans may hold the key to their survival, but she is unwilling to give up control. The story delves into the rising tension between the two leaders, Lady Zarek, who desires both the human male's DNA and their subjugation, and Captain Wilder, who understands that the humans are not to be so easily manipulated. A new element emerges as Lady Zarek becomes intrigued by Captain Wilder's defiance and strength. There's an undeniable attraction that she cannot dismiss, and soon the tension between them takes on a different dynamic. Captain Wilder too begins to notice her allure, her beauty, her intelligence, and the vulnerability she tries to conceal. As the two begin to share private conversations and confront the realities of the power struggle, an unexpected bond begins to form. This personal connection complicates matters, as it forces both Lady Zarek and Captain Wilder to confront their own feelings about their civilizations and their roles in the potential future of the Clearith. The stakes are raised. What will they be willing to sacrifice for the survival of their species, and will this newfound attraction change the fate of their people? Captain Wilder is presented with a disturbing ultimatum by the Clearith. In order for the Clearith to survive, they require male DNA, but the catch is that they need it from someone who is genetically compatible. The Clearith have no males left, so they seek to take the genetic material from the humans, specifically from Captain Wilder himself. This turns into a moral and personal dilemma for Wilder. He's faced with the choice of becoming the father of an entire species' future or finding a way to defy the Clearith's expectations. Lady Zarek, torn between her duties as a leader and the growing connection she feels toward Wilder, pushes him to make his choice. But as their relationship deepens, they both question whether they are simply pawns in a much larger cosmic game. As Captain Wilder grapples with his decision, he uncovers an underground faction of Clearith who are secretly working against Lady Zarek's leadership. These rebels believe that there must be a better way to secure the future of their people without relying on humans. They see Wilder's potential as a symbol for an independent path forward. The humans join forces with this rebellion, and a new plan is set in motion, one that could either destroy or save both species. The rebellion's rise creates a dramatic shift in the narrative, leading to a rebellion against Lady Zarek's government. Captain Wilder, now at the heart of the revolution, must choose which side he will fight for, and whether he will fight alongside Lady Zarek or against her. As the conflict escalates, so does the realization that the Clearith's future is not so easily determined. The final battle between the Clearith leadership and the rebels, with the humans caught in the middle, takes place on a barren moon orbiting the Clearith homeworld. The ultimate outcome of the war will decide whether the Clearith continue as they have for generations or whether they embrace a new form of life with the help of humans. The ending of this story sees the resolution of the tension between Lady Zarek and Captain Wilder. Together, they forge an alliance based on mutual respect rather than control or domination. The humans leave behind a legacy of their own that alters the course of the Clearith civilization, ensuring that both species grow together in harmony, understanding the true power of unity and the importance of mutual survival. This structure provides a foundation for an HFY story that mixes political intrigue, personal connection, and moral dilemmas, all while keeping the audience engaged with twists, turns, and evolving character relationships. Would you like to continue with the first part of the story or make any adjustments? The Clearith homeworld, a lush planet dotted with expansive floating cities and shimmering lakes, lay in an uneasy stillness. Despite their awe-inspiring beauty and the advanced technology that allowed them to manipulate the very atmosphere of their planet, the Clearith were on the brink of extinction. The once flourishing species now found themselves staring down the inevitable collapse of their civilization. Their only hope rested on the strange, unknown species that had captured their attention in a desperate cry for help: humanity. It was in the silence of the grandest Clearith city, nestled amidst towering ivory spires, that Lady Zarek awaited the arrival of the humans. The Clearith had watched from afar as humans had ventured into the stars, their ships dotting the skies of distant worlds. They were aware of the humans' resilience, their adaptability, and most of all, their dominance in ways the Clearith could scarcely comprehend. Lady Zarek, the leader of the Clearith, was a vision of regal beauty. Her silver hair flowed like a waterfall of moonlight, framing her sharp features and piercing violet eyes. Every movement was graceful, purposeful, and poised, but there was an edge to her. The weight of her people's survival pressed heavily on her slender shoulders, and the crushing desperation in her heart was a well-hidden secret. As the human ship descended into the atmosphere of Clearith, a cloud of dust and light engulfed the landing site. The Clearith assembled, their delicate features illuminated in the glow of the alien craft, standing in perfect formation as they prepared to meet the visitors. A mix of excitement and apprehension rippled through the crowd. Could the humans provide the answer they so desperately needed? The ship touched down with a soft hum, and the hatch opened, revealing the human crew. Captain Jax Wilder led the group, his strong presence immediately noticeable as he stepped onto the planet's surface. Dressed in a military uniform adorned with insignia denoting his rank and accomplishments, he exuded a quiet confidence. His piercing blue eyes scanned the surrounding Clearith, noting their graceful posture and otherworldly beauty. Their appearances were striking, unlike anything he had ever encountered before, but it was the sharpness in their eyes, the undeniable intelligence, that caught his attention. Behind him stood a diverse team of specialists, engineers, scientists, and soldiers, all eager to explore the potential for collaboration or, if necessary, conflict. Lady Zarek stepped forward to greet him, her every movement poised and deliberate. "Welcome to Clearith, Captain Wilder," she said, her voice smooth like velvet, yet carrying a weight that echoed in the stillness of the moment. "I am Lady Zarek, leader of our people. Your arrival comes at a time of great need." Wilder studied her closely, noting the air of command that surrounded her, the way the Clearith around her seemed to hang on every word she spoke. He had seen powerful leaders before, but none quite like this. There was an intelligence in her gaze, a depth of history and culture that was palpable, even to an outsider like him. "I've received your distress signal," Wilder replied, his tone calm but firm. "The situation is grave, and we are here to help, though I must confess, we are still gathering all the information we need before deciding on the next steps." Lady Zarek nodded, her expression unreadable. "You speak as if your people have their own struggles, Captain. What is it that you seek from us in return for your assistance?" Wilder's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing the unspoken tension. He had prepared for this moment, expecting a certain amount of negotiation, but something about the way Lady Zarek posed her question gave him pause. There was an undertone of desperation in her voice, though she masked it well. "We offer aid, but we are not here to become subjugated," Wilder said firmly. "Humanity has faced its own challenges, and we understand the value of independence. We are not here to be controlled, Lady Zarek." Her eyes flickered with something that might have been a hint of amusement, though it was gone in a blink. "We would never seek to control you, Captain. But we are at a crossroads. Our species' survival hinges on your willingness to help us reproduce, to ensure the future of our people." At this, the other members of the human crew exchanged glances. This wasn't what they had expected. They had anticipated an exchange of knowledge, perhaps some technology, but the notion of aiding in reproduction was something far more personal. Captain Wilder held her gaze, unflinching. "You want us to breed with your people?" he asked, his voice low. Lady Zarek's expression softened ever so slightly, though she retained her composure. "In essence, yes. But it is not as simple as mere breeding. Our technology can replicate parts of our species, but the key to our survival lies in a more organic process. One that can only be achieved through the DNA of your males." Wilder's mind raced. The implications of such a request were enormous. His team had come expecting to offer scientific knowledge, technology, maybe even resources, but this was something else entirely. "And what is it you expect from us in return?" Wilder asked, his voice more measured now. Zarek's violet eyes gleamed with an unreadable intensity. "Survival, Captain. The survival of your species as well. Together we could ensure both of our people thrive." He felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. The stakes had just risen dramatically. What would it mean for humanity to integrate with the Clearith in such an intimate way? Would they be complicit in the extinction of an entire species, or would they forge an unprecedented partnership? As the Clearith leaders ushered the humans into the heart of their city, Zarek's mind raced. She knew that to secure her people's future, she would have to do more than simply plead for help. She would have to make the humans believe that their futures were intertwined, that the cost of refusal would be too great for both sides. And so, under the haunting sky of Clearith, a new chapter in the history of two species began, a chapter that would test their strength, their beliefs, and the very fabric of their civilizations. The gleaming cities of Clearith were beautiful, but beneath their shining surfaces lay a world grappling with fear and desperation. The humans, led by Captain Jax Wilder, had been integrated into the high-tech metropolis with calculated precision. As they explored the Clearith's advanced systems, trying to understand their genetics, culture, and technology, it became clear that this was no simple request for help. It was an ultimatum, masked in diplomacy, and every move made in this delicate exchange had consequences. Captain Wilder and his team were escorted through the towering structures, the air vibrant with energy but thick with unspoken tension. The Clearith, with their otherworldly beauty and grace, were a species on the edge of survival, and yet their pride was a formidable barrier. They had invited humanity to assist, but it quickly became apparent that their idea of cooperation wasn't the same as what Wilder had expected. Wilder had already known that diplomacy was going to be complicated. The Clearith's desperate need for male DNA, human male DNA, was a matter of life or death for their civilization. Yet the way Lady Zarek had phrased her request was troubling. The Clearith were not asking for help, they were demanding it. Beneath the surface of their delicate beauty, there was a hardness that Wilder had not anticipated. And there was more at play than a simple interspecies cooperation. "I understand your people's predicament," Wilder had told Lady Zarek in their private meeting earlier. "But I need to know the full scope of what you're asking. You're not just looking for aid, you're asking us to change the course of your history." Lady Zarek's expression was unreadable, her violet eyes betraying nothing. "We are asking you to help us survive, Captain. This is not merely about DNA. It is about the future of two species. Humanity's adaptability and resilience could teach us many things, but our greatest need is for male offspring. You are the key to that." It was a delicate dance, and Wilder was acutely aware of every word exchanged. His team, meanwhile, was growing more uneasy by the hour. The questions they had about Clearith technology and their biology were vast, but the underlying issue was whether the humans could ever truly work with a species as proud and aloof as the Clearith. The power struggle between the Clearith and the humans wasn't just a matter of survival, it was about control, sovereignty, and trust. In the days that followed, Captain Wilder convened with his crew. They were given access to Clearith laboratories, where they began to study the alien species' reproductive technology. The Clearith had perfected methods of artificial insemination and genetic replication, yet their efforts had not yielded any viable male offspring for generations. While the women could reproduce among themselves in a limited sense, the absence of a natural male presence had begun to erode their society's structure, leading to a crisis of identity as well as survival. Dr. Rebecca Holt, the team's lead geneticist, was the first to fully grasp the problem. She had been given access to some of the most advanced Clearith research, which suggested that their failure to produce males was not just a biological anomaly, it was the result of an entire civilization designed around artificial means of reproduction. "Captain, this isn't just a matter of breeding. Their entire system is fractured. They've been relying on technology to substitute what nature intended, Dr. Holt said, her brow furrowed as she examined genetic data on her screen. Without males, they're not just facing extinction, they've become dependent on the idea of control, of perfection. Their society is all about maintaining beauty and order, but nature isn't always orderly. Wilder nodded grimly, already processing the gravity of the situation. The Cleareth had built a civilization of breathtaking beauty, one centered around aesthetics and genetic engineering, but at what cost? Their obsession with perfection had turned them into a fragile species, dependent on human intervention to maintain their future. The truth was dawning on him. The Cleareth were not simply seeking help, they were hoping that humanity would provide the missing piece of their fractured puzzle, and perhaps, in turn, reshape their destiny. Meanwhile, Lady Zarek, fully aware of the tensions brewing among the human team, took action. She summoned Wilder for another private meeting, this time with the other high-ranking Cleareth officials present. The atmosphere was thick with formality, but beneath the surface, there was an undeniable shift. The veneer of diplomacy was beginning to crack. "You still do not understand, Captain," Lady Zarek said, her voice calm but firm as she stood before the human team. "This is not merely about the survival of our species. This is about maintaining the ideals of our people, the ideals of beauty, intelligence, and grace. Our very essence is tied to these values. If we cannot reproduce naturally, then we lose what makes us Cleareth. We risk becoming something else." Captain Wilder studied her, sensing the vulnerability behind her composed exterior. "I get it, Lady Zarek. I understand your fear, but I'm not sure your people are ready for the kind of change that would come with our involvement. We can help, but it can't be under your terms alone. Humanity doesn't work that way." The Cleareth leader's eyes narrowed, her voice becoming more intense. "What would you have us do, Captain? Continue to live in this empty state? To let our civilization crumble while you stand by and watch? You may think you're offering an easy solution, but you are misjudging us. You do not understand the cost of what you offer." The exchange was charged with tension, a clash of ideals that neither side was prepared for. Wilder knew that the Cleareth were proud, and that their identity was built around something far more than mere survival. Yet, in his heart, he also knew that they were at a crossroads. If humanity was to help, it would need to be on their terms as well, not simply as pawns in the Cleareth's grand game of survival. He took a deep breath, his mind calculating the next move. "If we're going to do this, if humanity is going to help your people survive, it's going to require more than just a biological exchange. You have to be willing to change to grow. You're asking us to give you our most valuable resource, but in return we need something from you." Lady Zarek's gaze softened, though her composure remained intact. "And what is it that you seek, Captain Wilder?" "Equality," he said, his voice resolute. "Your people may be technologically advanced, but you've built your civilization on ideals that are unsustainable. If we are to cooperate, it has to be more than just biology. We need a partnership, one where both of our species have an equal say in what happens next." For the first time, Lady Zarek hesitated, her expression flickering with uncertainty. The thought of surrendering even a fraction of her people's authority was foreign to her, yet she recognized the truth in his words. Survival was not just about saving what remained, it was about transforming into something that could endure. As the days passed, the power struggle continued to intensify. Behind closed doors, both the Cleareth and the humans grappled with the challenge of trust, authority, and survival. It was no longer just about reproduction or genetic exchange, it was about the future of both species. Wilder knew that if they were to succeed, they would need to find a way to bridge the gap between two vastly different civilizations. But in the back of his mind, he also realized that the Cleareth's beautiful world, so pristine and perfect, might soon be shaken to its core. As the days stretched on in the Cleareth capital, the relationship between Captain Jax Wilder and Lady Zarek evolved into something unexpected. What had initially been an exchange of political and biological necessities slowly began to shift into something more personal. The tension between them, once purely professional, now simmered with a different kind of energy, one neither of them had anticipated. It began with their private meetings, the ones that were supposed to be strictly about the future of the Cleareth and humanity. In these moments, both leaders were forced to confront the hard truth that survival wasn't just a matter of biology or technology, it was about trust. And trust, as Wilder quickly discovered, wasn't something that could be demanded. It had to be earned. Lady Zarek was a study in contradictions. On the surface she was poised, a perfect leader in every sense. Her beauty was mesmerizing, ethereal even, and it was clear that the Cleareth had built their entire civilization around the idea of perfection. But beneath that surface, there was a depth to her, a vulnerability that Wilder saw flicker in her eyes during their conversations. It was in the way she held herself, how every word seemed to be carefully measured, as if any mistake could unravel everything she had worked for. It was in the subtle tremor of her voice when she spoke of her people's future, as if the weight of an entire civilization was about to collapse on her slender shoulders. And despite her power, despite her command, there was an undercurrent of fear in her that Wilder couldn't ignore. For his part, Wilder began to see Lady Zarek in a new light. Initially, he had viewed her as just another alien species desperately trying to cling to life, but over time he came to understand the complexity of her position. She was not just the leader of a dying race. She was the product of a society that had crafted perfection and beauty at the expense of everything else. She had inherited the responsibility for her people's survival, and in the process had buried any personal desires or weaknesses. One evening, after a particularly tense meeting about the future of their cooperation, Wilder found himself walking alongside Lady Zarek through the moonlit gardens of the Clearith Palace. The city behind them gleamed with artificial lights, but the garden was serene, the air thick with the scent of alien flowers. As they walked, the conversation turned to more personal matters, something Wilder hadn't expected. "You said once that your people fear change," he remarked, his voice low as they navigated the winding paths. "I can understand that, but why do you fear it so much? The future isn't set in stone. It's shaped by what we do with the present." Lady Zarek's eyes were distant, lost in the beauty of the garden, but Wilder could see the inner conflict in her gaze. "You don't understand," she said quietly. "Our entire society was built on ideals of perfection, of beauty. We were designed to be flawless, immortal in our own right. We were meant to lead the galaxy, to be the model for other species to aspire to. But what if we're wrong? What if everything we've worked for is a lie?" Wilder studied her for a moment, the weight of her words settling heavily between them. He had never imagined that someone as powerful as Lady Zarek, the leader of an entire civilization, could be so deeply conflicted. "You've sacrificed too much to just let go of it all," he said. "I get that. But you don't have to. You don't have to let go of everything. Change doesn't have to mean destruction. It can be growth." Lady Zarek turned to face him, her violet eyes piercing in the soft moonlight. "And what would you know of it, Captain? You are human. You are of a species that has struggled, fought, and bled for every inch of its existence. You are born from a history of war and survival. We have never known that. Our civilization was meant to be different." Wilder met her gaze evenly. "But that's just it, isn't it? Your civilization has never had to struggle, not in the way humans have. We've learned that survival requires more than just beauty or technology. It requires resilience. It requires adaptation." Lady Zarek's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I've been told that you humans are resilient. But resilience isn't enough when you have nothing left to hold on to." Wilder didn't know what compelled him to step closer, the words between them hanging in the air. It wasn't just their ideological differences that had shifted, but something more, something neither of them had planned for. The air between them seemed charged with an electric current, a pull neither could ignore. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching between them. Then, Wilder did something unexpected, something that startled both of them. He reached out, lightly touching her arm, his hand warm against the coolness of her skin. Her body tensed and her breath hitched for the briefest of moments. Lady Zarek's eyes met his, her expression unreadable. She should have pulled away, should have resisted. But she didn't. Something in her seemed to break, and she lowered her gaze, her chest rising and falling as she regained her composure. "I never expected you to understand," she whispered, her voice barely above the sound of the wind rustling the trees around them. "But I think you might be right. Maybe change isn't as terrifying as I believed. Maybe there's hope for us, even in the darkness." Wilder's heart skipped a beat. He had never imagined that a moment like this, an intimate, unspoken connection, would ever arise between them. But now, standing in the moonlight, it seemed like the natural progression of everything they had been through. They had been locked in a battle of ideals, each stubbornly holding on to their own beliefs. Yet in this moment, standing so close, with the world of the Clearith stretched out before them, it was as though everything else had faded into the background. But they couldn't forget the stakes. They couldn't ignore the fate of their peoples. And yet, in that quiet moment, neither of them could deny the undeniable pull between them. "We can't let ourselves forget what's at stake," Wilder said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet intensity. "But maybe we don't have to lose everything to save your people, Lady Zarek." Her lips parted as though she might say something in reply, But before she could, a soft, almost imperceptible sound broke the moment, the sound of footsteps approaching. Both turned, their connection abruptly severed by the intrusion. It was one of the Clearith Council members, a tall, elegant figure with silver hair who had been part of the discussions from the beginning. "Lady Zarek," the counselor said, bowing slightly. "The negotiations are ready to resume. The time for personal matters must wait." Zarek's expression immediately shifted, her cool composure returning. She nodded once, turning back to Wilder, her gaze lingering just a moment too long. "We will continue this later, Captain," she said softly, her voice now distant, the weight of her duties once again settling on her. "But perhaps we can find a way forward. Together." Wilder watched her walk away, the unspoken tension still hanging between them. The future of their species was uncertain, but for the first time since his arrival on Clearith, he allowed himself to hope, for both their civilizations and for the bond that was quietly beginning to form between them. The tension in the Clearith capital had grown palpable. Negotiations between the humans and the Clearith Council were ongoing, but the undercurrents of mistrust and desperation were impossible to ignore. Captain Jax Wilder had become acutely aware that the stakes were higher than he had originally anticipated. It wasn't just the survival of the Clearith that hung in the balance, it was the fragile equilibrium of power between two civilizations. Despite the growing rapport between Wilder and Lady Zarek, cracks in their tentative alliance were beginning to show. The Clearith Council was less than pleased with Zarek's increasingly unorthodox decisions. While she saw hope in the partnership with humanity, some members of the Council viewed the humans as a threat, an invasive species that might exploit their vulnerability for its own gain. Wilder stood in the command center of the human team's temporary quarters, staring at the holographic displays of Clearith biological data. Dr. Rebecca Holt and Lieutenant Marcus Kane flanked him, their expressions grim. "The Clearith Council isn't just divided," Kane said, crossing his arms. "Some of them are outright hostile. I've seen the way they look at us, like we're parasites." Dr. Holt nodded, her fingers flying across her tablet as she analyzed genetic data. "It's more than that. They're desperate, yes, but also scared. Their genetic makeup is a masterpiece of engineering, but it's fragile. They've bred out imperfections for so long that they've eliminated adaptability. That's why they can't survive without us." Wilder frowned, his mind racing. "And that's why they need male DNA, not just to reproduce but to introduce genetic diversity. Without it, their species will collapse under its own perfection." Holt leaned back, rubbing her temples. "That's the crux of it. They need us more than they want to admit. But I've been analyzing their tech. They could potentially bypass us entirely. It would take time, but they might not need human cooperation. They could take what they want by force." The room fell silent at her words, the implications hanging heavy in the air. Wilder knew the Clearith were advanced, and while they had extended a hand of diplomacy, the sword remained close at their side. Meanwhile, Lady Zarek found herself increasingly at odds with her council. The senior counselor, Velos Carr, was particularly vocal in his opposition. "You've allowed the humans too much freedom," Velos said, his tone icy as he paced the council chamber. "They are studying our biology, learning our technology. Do you not see the danger? They could use this knowledge against us." Zarek remained seated, her expression calm but her voice sharp. "And what would you have me do, Velos? Turn them away? Condemn our people to extinction?" Velos leaned forward, his silver hair glinting under the chamber's lights. "You assume they'll help us out of altruism. But humans are opportunistic. They'll use our weakness to gain power." Zarek stood, her commanding presence silencing the room. "And what is your alternative? To coerce them? To take what we need by force? That is not the Clearith way." Velos straightened, his expression hardening. "Perhaps it should be." The room erupted into murmurs, the council split between those who supported Zarek's vision of cooperation and those who leaned toward Velos's harsher methods. Zarek felt the weight of her position pressing down on her, and for the first time she wondered if her leadership would be enough to guide her people through this crisis. As tensions rose, Wilder and Zarek met in secret. They found themselves in a secluded chamber deep within the palace, its walls adorned with flowing, iridescent patterns that shifted like liquid light. The air between them crackled with unspoken words. "We're running out of time, Zarek," Wilder said, his tone urgent. "Your council is divided and my crew is getting restless. If we don't solidify this alliance soon, things could spiral out of control." Zarek sighed, her elegant frame tense. "You're right. Velos is pushing for more drastic measures. He doesn't trust your people, and truthfully many of my people share his sentiment. They fear that if we give you too much power we'll lose our identity. Wilder stepped closer, his voice lowering. And what about you? Do you trust us? She hesitated, her violet eyes meeting his. I trust you, Jax. But trust alone won't be enough to sway my people. Before Wilder could respond, an alarm blared, its piercing sound cutting through the palace. Zarek's communicator flashed and a voice crackled through. Lady Zarek, the research labs have been breached? Her eyes widened in alarm. Breached? By whom? The voice was strained. It's Velos. He's taken control of the genetic research facility. Wilder tensed. What the hell is he doing? Zarek's jaw tightened. Something reckless, no doubt. We need to stop him. The research facility was a sprawling complex of sleek, metallic corridors and glowing consoles. By the time Wilder and Zarek arrived, flanked by their respective teams, the situation was chaotic. Clearith guards loyal to Velos had barricaded the main laboratory, and the sound of energy weapons echoed through the halls. Wilder surveyed the scene, his tactical instincts kicking in. He's trying to seize control of the genetic data. If he gets what he's after, this alliance is dead. Zarek nodded, her expression steely. We cannot let him succeed. Together they devised a plan. Wilder's team would create a distraction, drawing Velos's forces away from the laboratory, while Zarek led a small group to infiltrate the facility and confront Velos directly. The execution was swift. Wilder and his team moved through the corridors, their presence drawing Velos's guards into a series of skirmishes. The humans' combat training gave them an edge, and they managed to hold their ground, buying Zarek precious time. Inside the laboratory, Zarek confronted Velos. He stood at the central console, his hands moving across the controls with practiced precision. Velos, stop this madness. Zarek commanded, her voice echoing through the chamber. Velos turned, his expression cold. Madness? No, Zarek. This is survival. If you lack the will to do what's necessary, then step aside. Zarek raised her weapon, her hand steady. This is not the way. You're jeopardizing everything we've worked for. Velos sneered. You're blinded by your infatuation with the humans. They are not our saviors, they are our undoing. As their standoff escalated, the tension in the room reached a breaking point. Velos activated a sequence on the console, and the laboratory's systems began to hum with energy. What have you done? Zarek demanded. I've initiated a forced extraction of the human's genetic material, Velos said, his voice devoid of remorse. We don't need their cooperation. We'll take what we need. Zarek's heart sank. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was an act of war. Wilder and his team, having neutralized the guards, burst into the laboratory just as Zarek and Velos's confrontation reached its peak. The sight of Velos at the console sent a surge of anger through Wilder. Stand down, Velos, Wilder growled, his weapon trained on the Clearith counselor. Velos's eyes narrowed. You should be thanking me, human. I'm ensuring the survival of your precious Lady Zarek's people. Wilder didn't hesitate. He moved with precision, disarming Velos and deactivating the console. The room fell silent, the tension still thick. Zarek stepped forward, her voice firm. Velos, you've betrayed your people. You'll answer for this. Velos's defiance faltered, and the weight of his actions seemed to crash down on him. He was escorted away, leaving Zarek and Wilder to face the aftermath of his treachery. As the dust settled, Zarek turned to Wilder, her expression a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. Thank you, Jax. I don't know if we can repair the damage Velos has done, but we must try. Wilder nodded, his resolve unshaken. We'll find a way. Together. The breach at the genetic research facility had left a scar on the tenuous alliance between humanity and the Clearith. Velos's betrayal reverberated through both parties, shaking the fragile trust that had been painstakingly built. The humans were now on high alert, wary of further treachery, while the Clearith were torn between loyalty to Lady Zarek and the fear-mongering rhetoric of Velos's supporters. In the aftermath of Velos's capture, Captain Jax Wilder stood in the human quarters, addressing his crew. The room was filled with tension, their earlier optimism eroded by the recent events. This changes nothing, Wilder began, his voice firm. We came here to secure an alliance, and that's exactly what we're going to do. The Clearith may be divided, but so are we, every time we face a challenge. The question isn't whether they're perfect allies, it's whether we can find common ground. Dr. Rebecca Holt frowned. Common ground doesn't mean much if their council can't control itself. Velos's actions weren't just a breach of trust, they were a declaration of intent. They'll take what they want if we give them the chance. Wilder met her gaze, his tone softening. And that's why we stay ahead of them. The Clearith need us more than we need them. But if we turn our backs now, their desperation could make them dangerous. Lieutenant Marcus Kane, leaning against the wall, nodded reluctantly. So what's the plan, Captain? We keep pushing, Wilder said. Lady Zarek is still on our side. For now, that's enough. In the Clearith Council chambers, Lady Zarek faced her own reckoning. The council was in an uproar, divided between those who condemned Veloz's actions and those who quietly supported his methods. Zarek stood tall, her voice cutting through the din. Veloz's actions were a betrayal of everything the Clearith stand for, she said, her tone unwavering. We are not savages. We do not take by force what can be achieved through unity. A counselor from Veloz's faction, a stern woman named Sela Aranth, countered. And yet your reliance on the humans has weakened us. They know too much about our biology, our technology. If they decide to use it against us, we'll be defenseless. Zarek's gaze hardened. The humans have shown restraint, even in the face of Veloz's treachery. If we abandon our principles now, we will have lost more than our future. We will have lost our identity. The council's murmurs subsided, though the tension remained palpable. Zarek knew that her authority was hanging by a thread, but she refused to let fear dictate her decisions. Later that evening, Zarek sought out Wilder. She found him in a quiet alcove of the palace gardens, gazing up at the twin moons that hung in the sky. For a moment, she simply watched him, the weight of her responsibilities pressing down on her. Captain, she said softly, stepping forward. Wilder turned, his expression guarded but not unkind. Lady Zarek, what brings you here? She hesitated, her usual composure faltering. I wanted to thank you. For stopping Veloz, and for not turning against us after his betrayal. Wilder nodded, his tone measured. I won't lie, Zarek. Veloz's actions shook my team's confidence. But I still believe in this alliance. I believe in you. Her gaze softened, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face. You have more faith in me than some of my own people do. Wilder studied her for a moment, then stepped closer. You're doing what you can to hold your people together. That's more than most leaders would manage in your situation. Zarek looked away, the moons casting a silvery glow on her features. I fear it may not be enough. Veloz's supporters are growing bolder. Even with him detained, the seeds of dissent he planted are taking root. Wilder's voice was firm. Then we uproot them. Together. The next day, a joint task force of humans and Clearith loyalists was assembled to address the growing unrest. Their mission, to investigate reports of Veloz's supporters amassing in the outskirts of the capital. Zarek insisted on leading the operation personally, with Wilder by her side. The journey to the outskirts was tense. The landscape outside the city was a stark contrast to its pristine beauty, a barren wasteland of jagged rocks and ash-gray soil. As the convoy approached a cluster of abandoned structures, Wilder's instincts prickled. This feels like a trap, he muttered to Zarek. She nodded, her expression grim. It likely is. But we cannot afford to back down. As if on cue, the ambush sprang into motion. Veloz's supporters, armed with salvaged weapons, descended upon the convoy. Energy blasts lit up the desolate landscape and chaos erupted. Wilder and Zarek moved in tandem, their actions a seamless blend of strategy and instinct. The human soldiers, with their superior training, held the line, while the loyalist Clearith fought fiercely to protect their leader. Amid the chaos, Wilder found himself separated from Zarek. His pulse quickened as he scanned the battlefield, finally spotting her engaged in a fierce duel with Sela Aranth. Zarek fought with elegance and precision, but Sela's brute strength gave her an edge. Wilder surged forward, cutting through the melee to reach them. Just as Sela raised her weapon for a finishing blow, Wilder fired a precise shot, disarming her. Zarek seized the opening, delivering a swift strike that incapacitated her opponent. Nice timing, Zare said, breathing heavily. Wilder smirked. Couldn't let you have all the fun. The tide of the battle soon turned, and Veloz's supporters were subdued. As the dust settled, Wilder and Zarek stood side by side, their bond solidified by the shared ordeal. Back in the capital, the captured dissenters were brought before the council. Zarek addressed them with the same authority that had carried her through countless crises. Your actions have endangered not only this alliance but the very survival of our people, she said. But I am not without mercy. Lay down your arms and pledge your loyalty to the Clearith, and you will be spared. Most of the captives accepted her offer, their defiance crumbling under the weight of their failure. But Sela Aranth, defiant to the end, refused. You're blind, Zarek, Sela spat. The humans will destroy us just as Velos warned. And when they do, your name will be cursed for leading us to ruin. Zarek's expression remained calm, but her voice was tinged with sorrow. If that is the price of peace, I will pay it. But I will not let fear dictate our future. Sela was taken away, her fate to be decided by the council. As Zarek watched her go, she felt a pang of doubt. But when she turned to Wilder, standing steadfast at her side, she found the strength to push forward. That night, as the city settled into an uneasy calm, Wilder and Zarek met once more in the gardens. The stars above seemed brighter, as if the universe itself was watching their every move. "You did well today," Wilder said, breaking the silence. Zarek shook her head. Today was a small victory. The real battle lies ahead. Wilder stepped closer, his voice steady. "Then we'll face it together." For the first time in weeks, Zarek allowed herself a faint smile. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of her world and the quiet resolve of the man beside her, she dared to hope that the future might still hold promise. The Clearith capital buzzed with unease. While Lady Zarek's leadership had quelled Velos's uprising, the underlying fractures in Clearith society remained. The alliance with humanity had weathered betrayal, battle, and doubt, but the question of its permanence lingered like a storm on the horizon. For Captain Jax Wilder, the time for words had passed. The Clearith's survival was not merely an academic problem, it was a mission. One final test stood before them, a challenge that would determine whether humanity and the Clearith could truly coexist. In the dimly lit briefing chamber, Wilder and Zarek reviewed the latest intelligence. Dr. Rebecca Holt's discovery of a critical breakthrough in genetic synthesis had reignited hope. By combining human and Clearith genetic material in a controlled process, they could stabilize the Clearith genome without compromising their unique biology. "The process works," Holt explained, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "But it requires a high-output energy source. Your world's infrastructure wasn't designed for this scale of bioengineering." Zarek furrowed her brow. "The stellar core nexus. It powers our planet's orbital systems. Its energy could support the synthesis." Wilder exchanged a glance with Zarek. "Let me guess, accessing the nexus isn't simple." "It's more than that," Zarek admitted. "The nexus is ancient technology predating our modern civilization. Activating it is dangerous. There's a reason it hasn't been used in centuries." Kane, leaning against the wall, let out a low whistle. "Sounds like a death trap." Wilder nodded. "Which is why we're the ones who have to do it." The journey to the Nexus site was fraught with peril. Located deep beneath the capital's foundation, the stellar core nexus was accessible only through a labyrinth of tunnels and ancient machinery. Wilder and Zarek led a small team of humans and loyal Clearith, each member handpicked for their skill and resolve. As they descended, the air grew heavy with heat and the faint hum of dormant energy. The tunnels were lined with ancient carvings, depicting the Clearith's ancestors in their prime, a stark reminder of how far they had fallen. Holt studied the carvings, her scientific curiosity momentarily outweighing the urgency of their mission. "This technology predates anything I've seen. If we could decode it—" "We'll have time for history lessons later, Doc," Kane interrupted, his weapon scanning the shadows. "Assuming we make it out of here." Zarek placed a hand on the wall, her expression reverent. "This is more than history. It's our heritage and our future." Wilder placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Then let's make sure we get there." The Nexus chamber was a marvel of engineering. A massive crystalline structure dominated the center, pulsating faintly with residual energy. Surrounding it were control panels etched with symbols that glowed faintly as the team approached. Holt immediately set to work, her fingers flying across the alien interface. "It's incredible," she murmured. "The systems are still functional, but we'll need to recalibrate them to handle the energy surge." "Can you do it?" Wilder asked. She nodded, though her expression was tense. "It'll take time." Time was a luxury they didn't have. As Holt worked, the chamber's defenses began to activate. Mechanical constructs emerged from hidden alcoves, their sleek forms bristling with weaponry. "Figures," Kane muttered, raising his rifle. "Nothing's ever easy." Wilder and the others engaged the constructs, their weapons flashing in the dim chamber. The battle was fierce, the constructs relentless in their programming to protect the Nexus. Wilder's team held their ground, buying Holt the time she needed. "Almost there," Holt shouted over the din. Zarek fought with a grace born of desperation, her energy blades slicing through the constructs. At one point she was cornered, but Wilder intervened, dispatching her attackers with precision. "Thanks," she said breathlessly. Don't mention it, he replied, reloading his weapon. Let's finish this. With a final keystroke, Holt shouted, "It's done. The Nexus is online." The chamber filled with light as the crystalline core roared to life, its energy coursing through the ancient machinery. The constructs froze, their systems overloaded by the surge. Wilder helped Zarek to her feet, their victory tempered by exhaustion. Now what? Zarek approached the core, her gaze filled with awe. Now we harness its power. Back at the capital, the Nexus's activation was met with a mixture of awe and apprehension. The energy surge had stabilized the Clearith's planetary systems, and Holt's genetic synthesis program was ready to begin. But not everyone celebrated the milestone. In the council chambers, opposition simmered. Sela Arendt's supporters argued that relying on human technology and cooperation was a betrayal of Clearith independence. Zarek addressed the council with an authority that silenced her detractors. This is not a surrender. It is a partnership. Humanity has given us the means to preserve our species without sacrificing who we are. We owe them not subservience but gratitude. The council voted, and for the first time in weeks, Zarek found herself with a majority in favor of her plans. The genetic synthesis program began in earnest. Humans and Clearith worked side by side, blending science and culture in a way that had once seemed impossible. The first successful births were celebrated as miracles, the children embodying the best of both species. For Wilder, the mission was complete. Yet as he prepared to leave the Clearith homeworld, he found himself drawn to Zarek. "You did it," he said during their final meeting in the gardens. "You saved your people." Zarek smiled faintly. "We saved them. You were as much a part of this as anyone." Wilder hesitated, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. "So what happens now?" Zarek's gaze softened. "Now we rebuild. Together, if you'll allow it." For the first time in his life, Wilder felt a pull stronger than duty, a connection that transcended species, conflict, and the vastness of space. "I think I'd like that," he said, his voice low. As the human ship departed, carrying news of the Alliance back to Earth, Zarek stood on the balcony of the palace, watching the stars. The Clearith were no longer alone, their future brighter than it had been in centuries. And for humanity, the Alliance marked a turning point, a chance to prove that their resilience and ingenuity could not only save themselves but forge a legacy among the stars. Together they had defied extinction, betrayal, and doubt. Together they had forged a future worth fighting for. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.